This is Voicemail, the Universal Postal Union's podcast covering the wonderful world of mail. I'm your host, Ian Kerr. In this episode, I'm joined by Marie Austenaa, Head of Digital Identity at Visa. Joining me on the line is Marie Austenaa. She's Head of Digital Identity at Visa. Welcome, Marie, to the Voicemail podcast. Before we get stuck into digital identity, let's start off with the question that we ask all of our guests on the UPU Voicemail podcast. Tell us about your first memory of the post.
Yes, of course, and thank you for having me here. I might be revealing my age, but my first memory of the post is when I got a savings book from my grandmother with some money in it for birthday, Christmas, whatever it was one of those days. And it was a bank account at the post office. So every time I got some money for my birthdays or other events, we would visit that post office to pay this money into the account, into this post book, and make a formal recording of it. So that's a very fond memory. Shortly afterward, it turned into a bank, but still. It was saving money with the post office. It was my first memory of the post.
Marie, you've led various projects across mobile networks, financial services, and now global efforts around digital access. Was there a moment in your career when you realised that this work was about more than just technology, when it became about people or inclusion or something more personal? I mean, what does it mean to you to help someone go from being unseen to truly participating in the digital financial system?
Yeah, I think that's at different levels. And it's something, on one hand, I probably think about almost on a daily basis, but it's also some quite fundamental, eye-openers. You just realize this is pretty profound. So at the personal level, I get a great relief when I can use my digital identity to get access to all sorts of services. I can register my daughter for the summer school and avoiding an impossible to remember username and password, and to the realization that without identity, I'm just nobody. I'm no healthcare, not getting into a bank account, and I'm actually the lucky one. When I started to work in digital identity at the GSM associations, we had a program for birth registration, and this was the eye-opener. My relief from not having to remember a password is just nothing in comparison to not being counted. No healthcare, no immunization, no schooling, no property, no bank account, no employment. You just no way of proving that you exist. And that's so not immediately personal because I'm so lucky. I have an identity, but this really dawned on me that this is profound. Having a digital identity or not makes such a big difference in people's lives.
Visa is a global technology leader in digital payments, but your team is focused on something deeper, how people access digital financial services and choices and opportunities. So can you describe Visa's role in building trust-based digital ecosystems, especially through partnerships like the one with the UPU?
Yeah, so we are really both proud and happy about the partnership with UPU. So Visa is a payment technology company. We deliver trust at scale. You take a card anywhere and it works. It takes the right amount and the merchant gets paid. And that's because we invest huge amounts in cybersecurity, technology, expertise, standard certifications. I mean, there's a whole ecosystem that has to work. I think the challenge is that not everyone is really able to benefit from this. So the partnership that we have with UPU is really important to extend the reach of these capabilities to those that are less privileged and also to drive financial inclusion. Also in a way that is really secure, privacy protective, convenient. So Visa was, just a few notes on the relationships with UPU. Visa was the founding donor of the UPU's Financial Inclusion Technical Assistance Facility. I don't know if you normally abbreviate it, FITAF, back in 2017, which is some time ago now, alongside the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this initiative was launched to enable 250 million digital payment accounts, funded a number of projects, and had an impact of about 13 million people. And a lot of those being women as well. And we've also extended this collaboration now with the UPU, and I think we just announced that and this covers now a few more areas. I mentioned about cybersecurity, but it's also about digitizing the postal financial services. such as international remittances, which is a really important source of money for people really around the world, but also things like bill payments. No need to walk into the nearest town, maybe 5 hours away by foot, but also inbound payments. It's also the provisioning of government services through the postal networks, as well as supporting SMEs, small, medium, micro businesses for digitalization and finance needs, and as well cybersecurity and risk management. And I think that's a really good partnership to bring the technical capabilities around scalability and secure payments really to everybody that we wouldn't normally reach as well, but that we can really only do with a partnership such as the one with UPU. So that's something we're really excited about.
Visa's approach to digital identity focuses on enabling access rather than becoming an identity provider. So what does that role look like in practice? And how do you ensure that the systems being built function more like public infrastructure that aligns with national identity systems rather than like more of a siloed tech solution? I mean, this is particularly relevant for us in the postal sector, as you were just outlining, especially since these national identity programs are managed and owned by governments, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. But there are some similarities as well with payment infrastructure. So a payment infrastructure is built to operate across unconnected parties like banks and merchants. Digital identity programs by the governments are a few different flavors, but typically it's very similar that the government will issue an identity that is used sometimes just for government purposes in a closed system, and then you can get these silos. But really, in most cases, and when it has the most benefits for the whole economy, is that it's expected that this government-issued identity will also be relied on. It will be used by unrelated parties, such as the private sector. Again, very similar to payments. Unrelated parties that need to trust each other and through standards and processes and so forth. The challenge, though, is that the technology and the infrastructure for payment and identity is actually very different. So there's always this worry that I have that we will reach kind of silos or proprietary systems to allow scaling so that private sector can benefit from the identities and interact with identities created by the governments. And to avoid these silos, then it really is essential that there are global standards that are being adopted to get interoperability and also to avoid lock-in so that the governments has a choice for the kind of solutions that they want to deploy. So of course, as to now the governments are digitizing their infrastructure for government services, and also the payment, the governments do a lot of paying money and receiving payment, but also that the payment systems are being upgraded. We now have the chance to make sure that these work together seamlessly in a way that's probably been proprietary before. So just mentioning one small example of what we're doing to address that specifically, we're working closely in the EU, and that's now kind of setting the standard for digital identity for the next generation digital identity systems. But we're working very closely in the EU on the new initiatives for the European identity wallet, where we are at one hand adopting the global standards around identity, but we're also working across industry and across the various governments to make sure that technology can also be used for payments, including interacting with existing payment infrastructure. So there are two different worlds, but we are looking at standards and cross-industry collaboration to make sure that payment and identity can work together and avoid these siloed technologies, really the benefits of everyone.
Well, let's talk about the UPU's Gender and FinTech study then. This study, which was supported by Visa, revealed that over 740 million women are still financially excluded. So why does this gap persist? And how can digital ID help us build systems that, let's not only protect privacy and safety, but also give women real control over how they access and use digital services?
Yeah, I mean, history shows that women are just not being prioritized in the same way. And I could probably even stop there, but it's not prioritized in the same way. And especially when we look at financial inclusion and generally, participation in the economy and in finance. And there are so many reasons for that. Of course, I mean, women do often, they face barriers to financial access. It could be a lack of a formal identity, lower levels of mobile phone ownership, something as basic as that, or even limited control over financial decision making. So we can go back again to, cultural, societal values, infrastructure, and so forth. But I think a really important tool that we have to address that is really a digital identity. I briefly touched on the importance of registering babies at birth, and that starts also with registering girls when they're born and not wait until they're 7, which is often what happened. But a digital identity should really help that. Identity is the door that allows you to get access to the economy, to financial services, to anything really. Making it digital means that it's easier to register, that you can digitize the processes, you can make it easy. You don't have to really visit the next village. So having the ability to remotely register at birth and then document this, and then use this identity to confirm who you are later on in interactions with governments will really help. And I think that is the first key really to ensure financial inclusion, especially by women as well.
You mentioned small businesses earlier, so let's talk about how Visa is also supporting programs to help small business, especially women-led ones, go digital. What made supporting women-led small businesses such an important focus in Visa's work with the UPU? And it'd be great to hear how you think that postal networks can also advance this work.
Yeah, so we have a number of activities to support the financial inclusion of women. I can mention a few of them. And I think underpinning these ones is that when you focus on getting women involved, we see numbers like women entrepreneurs going on hiring 4 more people on average. You support women, mothers, and you're bringing with you the whole family or even, large part of the community. So there's something fundamental there in that just have a great effect in bringing the benefits further. So which is why we have a focus on supporting the financial inclusion of women through a number of initiatives. So we have the Visa Foundation, where now just in February, we launched a UK initiative to support and empower women-led small businesses. And this includes training, community building, as well as a microgrant program. And an important part of that is actually the training as well, helping women to become much more financially aware. She's Next is another initiative that we have. That's a global initiative to spotlight women when they are funding and running and growing their own small businesses. And again, that's also one key pillar of that is also around education, actually, and training. And then we have the Visa New Doors program that is targeting displaced people and helping them to move forward.
Let's talk about collaboration and partnerships then, because when it comes to these inclusive systems, collaboration is key. So how do you see different players, whether it's postal services, tech companies, regulators, etc., how do you see them working together effectively? And what's, in your opinion, one practical thing that each of us can do, whether it's in a post office or a regulatory body or the government or the private sector? What's one thing that we can do to make digital access more inclusive and human-centered?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think a complicated one as well. In fact, I'm not sure if there is such a one thing that there's no such a thing as a silver bullet. But I think when I look at post offices, I think they are absolutely essential in the rollout of digital identity, which, as we've talked about, is a good first step for financial inclusion and access. And post offices are typically nearby, they're in your community, they are present. And even in countries like Germany, the post offices are performing a very important part to do the identity verification. In the absence of bank branches and government offices that are everywhere, post offices are everywhere, and they have well-trained people, they have processes, procedures, and you can, they're set up in a way that they can be trusted, and they are instrumental in helping people to establish a digital identity. So I think in that sense, the post offices are essential. The other point to make is around collaboration, and you have part of your question was collaboration is really key, and how the different players can work together. I think this is also about being joined up, looking left and looking right. If you're the regulator, what needs to be in place to ensure that whatever identity is being issued has legal equivalence, that you can actually use it for those use cases that you need? If you're a government, how are you enabling the private sector to be able to leverage and to make use of the identity that you're now issuing to all the citizens? Is that going to be sufficient, for instance, to open a bank account, even at the basic level? So there is working together and take this holistic approach is just essential to make identity work. And just because it is such a foundational capability that everybody, that so many different participants can rely on.
And I think that's a great point about joined up thinking as well. Very, very important when it comes to this sort of work. Now, you've worked across various sectors and regions. What's one lesson you've learned about building systems that truly work for people, not just around them?
Yeah, there's a few points about that. Digital identity is just an ingredient. It's just an enabler. It's something that makes it easier for me to prove who I am in a digital service where nobody can see me, but also for the place that I need to prove who I am, for the services I want to access to really know who I am and what I need. So since it is just such an enabler service, then there are two things. One is that it's important to understand the context, the kind of use case, which means that you need to stay curious and never stop learning. But the other thing is that it's very hard to understand. So a digital identity is very much around change management. It's a digital transformation. And how do you explain that? How do you educate? How do you communicate about it? How do you give assurances to the citizen, to the people who will use a digital identity, that it can be trusted? And how do you educate governments and others on how the digital transformation can really benefit everybody? So it's quite a complex topic, really.
Let's have a look towards the future now. If you were going to write a message for a future generation of leaders working on digital access and inclusion, what would you want them to remember as they design tools and systems that could potentially affect billions of lives?
Yeah, I have two, and maybe these are obvious but hard in that category. First one is to make sure to design systems that are human-centric, and humans comes in all shapes and abilities. If you sit in a wheelchair, it's hard to use stairs. When you come with a pushchair, stairs are hard. When you're a business person trying to run to catch your airplane and you come with a suitcase, stairs are hard. Point is that when you're designing it in a way that accommodates most people, you will give benefits as well to most people. Sitting in a wheelchair is not necessarily considered to be an exception. It's the same thing if it's hard for you to walk. The same thing, being able to command your mobile with voice is useful if you're blind, if you're illiterate, or if you just got your hands full. So designing for inclusivity really benefits everybody. The examples I'm giving are basic, but I'm sure that there's so many more examples. It really will give benefits to everybody, much more beyond. And the second one, which is maybe even more important, because with a digital service, change and problems, fraud happens at the speed of light. And so any design around digital identity, around inclusion, you're saying billions of people, bad things can go wrong really quickly. The design must be optimized for privacy and security. Don't forget convenience at all. It needs to be useful as well. Otherwise you get zero users, but we have to really consider privacy and security. A digital identity is powerful and it can be abused, whether that is a government, it can be private companies, it can be fraudsters. So really don't compromise. Invest in design for privacy and security. That's the other advice I would give.
Well, Marie, we've covered a lot of territory in our discussion today, talking about financial inclusion and digital identities and digital payments and all manner of things. There's lots of work yet to come from the partnership between the UPU and Visa. We're looking forward to the fruits of that partnership. So Marie Austenaa, Head of Digital Identity at Visa, thank you very much for joining us on the UPU Voicemail podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Voicemail, the official podcast of the Universal Postal Union. Subscribe to the podcast on your favourite podcast platform and you'll get each episode downloaded to the device of your choosing as it's released. My thanks to the team at the UPU for their help putting together this episode. I'm your host, Ian Kerr, and I look forward to your company next time on Voicemail, the podcast of the UPU.